When I was a young guy dreaming of owning my own tortoise sanctuary, the radiated tortoise was definitely on my bucket list. They are some of the most beautiful tortoises on earth, but they're also one of the most imperiled. Today, I'm going to teach you how to go from a baby to an adult and what they need. Soup to nuts. We'll see you in a minute.
Our animal mission is simple: education in action, conservation in action. This is Kamp Kenan.
All right, everybody, as you guys can imagine, this is just an honor to have some of the most beautiful tortoise species sharing space in my front yard. You've seen them in many videos, but I've got something exciting. As you know, those of you who follow the channel, a few weeks ago, we got 3 beautiful baby radiated tortoises. These little guys here hatched out just about a week and a half ago, and as you can see underneath, their umbilicus or their yolk sac has been absorbed. So it's time to now get them in their nursery and we can get these guys fed and interested. Look at how outgoing they are. They're just such beautiful little tortoises. It's gonna be really fun setting these guys up. I love them. Now, the things you got to know about the radiated tortoises, yes, they are an endangered species. And if you look over here, they're munching on some carrot right now. So any radiated tortoises that are in the United States were either confiscated animals from the illegal wildlife trade, or they were the generational or the progeny. What is that word again?
Progeny, right?
Yeah, the progeny. Thank you, Tom. I'm so glad you're there to produce me sometimes. They're the progeny of animals that were, of course, once illegally imported into the United States. Now, in order to buy legal radiated tortoises, you have to have either a captive bred wildlife permit, as does the seller, in order to sell across state lines, or you can only get them from a breeder that lives within your state. I'm here in Florida. I don't have the captive wildlife permit to export them out of this state, so I can only legally sell to somebody that lives in the state of Florida with a valid Florida state driver's license. So basically, guys, they do that to cut down on and to really keep a track on the trade of these animals. The other thing you should know, in the last 2 years, the Turtle Survival Alliance was on hand in Madagascar to help out a confiscation that was basically found out these animals were being exported to China, where the market for them is just vast. There's so many people in China now that there is a new middle class with disposable income. So many people think of turtles and tortoises as good luck, and it's a status symbol to have one of the most rare animals. Well, unfortunately for this beautiful, as you can see, radiated tortoise, they were being completely taken out of Madagascar, and as I mentioned, there was a confiscation. In the last 2 years, 20,000 animals were saved from being exported illegally out of Madagascar. The Turtle Survival Alliance, the TSA, which I happen to be a member of the organization, they went out there, they brought some of their best vets, they brought some of their best zoo conservationists to set up and triage some of the animals. They were in bad condition, they were just without food, without water for weeks, and they were all found, at least 10,000 of them on one of these confiscations were found inside a house. Every room in the house was filled with radiated tortoises, shells clunking everywhere. And as you can imagine, that is just not how these beautiful animals are supposed to live. So they are being completely taken out of Madagascar. The story is the same, guys. The country of Madagascar has its own political struggles. People are in poverty. So what that means is when you see an animal like this, it could provide a person a year's salary. And when it comes to protecting a tortoise or saving your own children and feeding them, you can imagine what somebody who is trying to help their children is going to decide. They're going to go for and try and make some money off these animals. The good news is that there are a lot of these animals in the United States that are being bred. We like to often joke around that it's one of the most widespread endangered animals you can find in the United States. That being said, we should really work hard to try and keep these animals in Madagascar where they belong and leave the captive ones captive and the wild ones wild. The other thing, guys, We really should. I often say this, you know, so many times conservation relies on people, and it relies on lifting people out of poverty and making sure that there are opportunities for everyone to lift themselves out of poverty, to have the quality of life that many of us in the Western world have. So it's really going to take all of us coming together to help people out so we can in turn help animals out. All right, so that's enough of that. Let's get moving and show you what I'm all about here. So we've got, of course, this beautiful cage. It's a tortoise house from ZooMed. I've retrofitted it. I've got an extra wire on it because the wire it comes with, I get worried that maybe a rat or a snake or something could slither in. I like using these because I can easily lift them up and move them in and out of the sun. As you know, little guys like this, they really require a lot of UVB to develop the strong shell and bones that they need. So I want to make sure they have a nursery that they can get outside. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to move over to these buckets right here. And basically, I've pre-mixed some repti bark and some coconut shavings, or rather it's more like a coconut dirt. Okay, so this stuff is very good. You can even use organic potting soil, mix it in with the repti bark. I added a little bit of water. It's pretty damp, but I know that it's going to dry off quickly. Now the thing with baby tortoises, when you're starting with most any baby tortoise, guys, you're going to want to have a more humid substrate, because what's going to happen is I'm going to lay this down like this. All right, we're going to spread it out, and what will happen over time, since I've made it nice and thick, is basically the top layer is going to dry first, and then that bottom layer is going to keep that moisture. So the tortoises are going to be able to nestle down into that moist layer when they want to search for a microclimate. Some of you may have heard me talk about microclimates before. Well, baby turtles and tortoises, and in fact many different animals, will search out microclimates. It's basically a modification of the climate. Okay, so right now I'm in Florida. Subtropical climate. It's about 82 degrees today, but in the shade it's a little bit cooler. In direct sun it's going to be a little bit warmer. There'll be higher humidity, perhaps down near the roots of a plant. This is places where you can find baby tortoises, other reptiles, when they want to get comfortable. So it's very, very important. We try and replicate that in whatever enclosure that you guys are setting up. Very, very important. So I spread this stuff around, and I'm going to pat it down a little bit, give it a little bit more firmness, makes it easier for the baby tortoises to walk on. It's also good, I've talked to a good buddy of mine, a really knowledgeable gentleman, Vic Morgan, and Vic believes, this is all anecdotal, there's no scientific proof, but it makes sense. He believes that the tortoises need resistance to develop those strong bones and good posture. As we know, certain tortoise species need good posture, like our Galapagos tortoises. If they don't get it, their legs splay out. So we want to create an opportunity for these little guys to get really nice and big and strong. So I'm going to pat this down so that it gives some resistance. All right, so we got the substrate down, right? So what's next, you may ask? Something simple. How about a little hide box? Okay, you can get one of these. It's designed for snakes to make it real simple, but the baby tortoises will love it as well. But what I'm going to do different that I don't normally do with the snakes is I'm going to go over here again, and I've pre-soaked some sphagnum moss. Okay, this is also called orchid moss, and not orchid, as I've made the mistake. Is it? It's orchid. Yeah, orchid moss, not orchid moss. I've said that in the past. I'm a bit of a nut. But sometimes I read without reading, you know what I mean? I look at something and my brain decides, oh, it's the wrong word. But anyway, I'm squeezing the excess moisture out. But now what we've got is a really nice, moist area. And I'm gonna go ahead and spread this stuff out. You see this? I'm just moving it about. So when the tortoises really want a nice humid area, they've got a nice humid hide. And what we've learned, and what scientists and other keepers of these animals theorize, is that when the tortoises are young, shell development is at its most crucial point. So when we have a little baby tortoise like this, we want to provide everything it needs for that shell growth. So that means the right food, that means UVB light, that means not overfeeding it, and it also means a humid hiding area. They really theorize that that helps these shells grow when they're in these early stages of life. Look at how beautiful this is. I mean, come over here. Check this out. Is this amazing? Look at that. You can really see the difference in size of a week and a half old and a 20-year-old tortoise. Is this just incredible? But already showing that beautiful radiated design. This is just amazing. And as you can see, the radiated adults, they're actually eating some carrot. I like to give my tortoises carrot from time to time. It's a nice little treat. It's healthy for them. But you can see where they're living, right? They're on this beautiful grassland. This is what we would consider a grassland species. So they're going to eat a high fiber diet, basically high fiber, low protein. Every once in a while, a lot of herbivore animals will wind up nibbling on some dead animal, maybe some eggshell, maybe even gnawing on bones. I've actually put bones of goats out in my tortoise enclosures, and the tortoises will nibble on it and use it as a cuddle bone, which is another thing you can use to get calcium into these animals. Cuddle bone. You can find it on Amazon in bulk. It's basically cuttle bone, fish bone. It's very chalky, and a lot of people use it to trim, for self-trimming of a parrot's beak. Well, it does the same thing for the beak of a tortoise, and that calcium is really good. So, okay, back to setting this little guys up. The next thing we want to do is we want to make sure these guys have water. Now, I went and got a little bit of water right here, so I don't have to go too far. So we got a little bit of water, and I'm going to go ahead and just place that in the corner. I like to put it in the corner because I know that these little guys are going to pace the walls for a while, and at least when they pace it, they'll learn that the water is in that area. I'm going to do the same thing with the food. I'm going to put the food over here. And you notice how these water bowls and dishes are very shallow? Very important. As you can imagine, a little baby tortoise is kind of like a newborn, right? So any species of little tortoise, you don't want them to flip over in the water bowl and drown. Sadly, I've had that happen. Not a fun thing to come home and see a tortoise upside down in a water bowl that's too deep and the animal has drowned. It's kind of a bummer. So you want to make sure you're definitely taking care of that. So what I like to do is sometimes I sink these down a little bit into the substrate to make it easier for the tortoises to get on up and in, and then just keep an eye on that. But now, guys, we're going to put some of these little guys in. Let's put them in and see how they behave. There we go. The other thing to be careful of, and I like to do this too, I brought this little bit of bark out just because you guys know me. I love to keep things natural and just make it look good. So there's a little hiding area for them as well. As you can imagine, this folds down, so there'll be shade on this side. This folds up, they'll be protected, and the sun can beat in. You want to make sure they have ample places to get out of the sun. And right now they're just kind of doing exactly like I said. They're just moving about, checking out their new little habitat. As far as foods for the radiated tortoises, as you can see, they're eating the carrots. Grass is going to be about 70% of their diet, but if you don't live in an area where these guys can graze, romaine lettuce, collard green, escarole, endive, dandelion greens, all very good sources of roughage for these guys. As far as fruit, I like to feed them some melon and watermelon every once in a while. And during the dry parts of the year, I actually feed them iceberg lettuce. A lot of people freak out about iceberg lettuce because it doesn't hold a lot of nutrients, but what it does have is a lot of moisture, a lot of water. And so they're able to absorb that water. It's called preformed water. It's taking water out of the foods you eat. They, of course, also have the ponds that you see in the background, and there are areas where these tortoises can just drink from. So it's a pretty cool habitat. They've got everything they need. Other foods, they eat the Missouri tortoise diet, herbivore diet, basically any prepared food that any of the reptile specific companies make is going to work well for them, as long as it's the grassland species. So you want to make sure that it adheres to that low protein, high fiber diet. And it's really cool when you can hear them crunching on this stuff. I like to feed them the carrot because it is good for beak trimming. It's good for beak maintenance. You ever see a tortoise that has an overgrown beak? You might want to check out the video I did where we trimmed down the beak of the Greek tortoise. Very important tortoise husbandry you're going to need to know. But by leaving these animals out here, and there's just more down there, it's so cool to see them all. By leaving them out here and by them constantly grazing, you really get an opportunity to see them doing their thing. And that often will wear down the beak. So here we have brand new generation of radiated tortoises, man. And Tom's got a question. What's going on, buddy?
I do.
Yeah, what's up?
I think a big question I'm wondering, I bet a lot of people are wondering, is what sort of expertise keeper would you say should start with these? Like,
yeah, very funny story. That's a great question. Being that these are not a very inexpensive tortoise, you're looking at between $1,000 and $1,500 depending on the beauty of the babies, and that's just for the babies. The adults are even more money, and of course because they are not allowed to be imported into this country again, so any tortoise you get, the market is very small because there's just not a lot of them being sold all over the place. But that being said, some people get nervous, like, oh God, you know, this must be an expert level. And to be honest, it's kind of not. They're a pretty decently hardy tortoise. I'd say them a moderately hardy tortoise. Of course, you want to keep them out of any kind of cold weather. They don't like it when it gets below 65 degrees, so I make sure they have they're brought in, or they're going to have a heated shelter that I'll be building in video to come, as I've moved them here earlier this year to this new enclosure without a shed. But basically, these guys, I think an intermediate keeper could do well with them, because they're going to rely on the same keys. Oh, which brings me, I don't want to forget, I'm going to put this little one in, but we know that baby tortoises need the proper basking temperature, so if you go on the indoors, you're going to want to have one of these kind of lights. You can get a larger one if you want. Zoom Ed makes them. Many different reptile producers make these, and that can sit on top. Make sure you have the right wattage. You may want a 100-watt bulb that will heat up the basking area underneath to at least 100 degrees. Between 95 and 105 degrees is good basking temperature. I'm talking directly under the light. Baby tortoises like to get that metabolism going when they wake up. The other key thing that you're going to need, and you can get a larger one than this, I like these slimline Zoom Ed fixtures because they're just neat. You know, they're very clean looking, but the bulb itself has that UVA and UVB spectrum of lighting. And I like these because they cover a wider area rather than just the screw-in ones that you put in a small fixture. This broadcasts the light all over the place, as does the sun. Okay, so it's very important to have that nice distribution of light. This doesn't really put off a lot of heat, but it puts off the right UVB wavelengths that are going to aid in this tortoise's development. And you're going to want to check those bulbs, the UVB bulbs, about once every 6 months to make sure that they're up and running. And they even sell a UVB indicator you can put underneath and make sure it's still providing the amount of UVB and UVBA that you need. And they are ramming into the tripod there. But I really love this species. They're rewarding. I want to shout out to my friend Connor. He's one of our Patreon supporters. Connor actually, the first tortoise species he ever got was actually a radiated tortoise from me. I asked him, I said, listen man, have you ever done this before? He's like, no, but I've read up, and he did. He answered all the questions, and they are doing just superbly. So I'm really, really happy for that. So if you've got the extra income and you're looking for a very unique and beautiful tortoise that is it's definitely a hardier tortoise, the radiated tortoise is the one for you. Oh, before I forget, there's one more crucial thing about these tortoises that's so amazing, why I'm so excited we've got babies. Before I go, guys, these little dudes require what's called diapause. Now, diapause is a stop in development, either environmental or temperature, which I guess is environmental. It's an environmental pause in the development of the embryo and the egg. So in order to get these guys to hatch, or to get them to hatch at a better rate, you've got to take the eggs and cool them down for 1 month. Between 50 and 70 degrees, you can cool them down. They stay cooled for a month, then you let them get up to room temperature, then you place them in the incubator, and then about 4 months later, you get a little baby tortoise. So scientists, I'm not exactly sure. Some diapause comes from temperature, and some diapause is changes in humidity, like fly river turtles and elongated tortoises. And I think the reason that is, again, just my own thoughts, is that it allows the eggs or the hatchlings to hatch at the best possible time in order for them to survive. All right, I think we've covered a lot, Tom. I think we have.
Definitely have.
Good questions, brother, and thanks for jumping in on that. I'm sure a lot of people are going to appreciate that. So there you have it, radiated tortoises, a new generation of life here. Endangered species that's got a really good chance at total survival because they're being bred in captivity by people like myself and maybe like you one day. So thanks a lot. We'll see you guys soon on another episode of Kamp Kenan. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all soon. This little guy's going in his new home.